We are slaying monsters.
Don't let the ghosts and the ghouls disturb you, darling.
I think ghost stories most of the time are inherently historical epics.
Yeah.
It's just sort of the nature of the way that they are. Because ghosts require like history and past and people who have lived and died and had experiences in a location. And
right. Yeah, you can't get away from it. So is this your justification for taking me through an exciting story of the Birmingham Industrial District?
Oh, it's going to be so much fun.
Is this how you justify this to me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This is just think of it as an opportunity to really go down a historical trail, put yourself in the shoes of the people that have come before you, and just, all of those like boring ass history classes that you had. Like, let's make them fun instead.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good challenge.
Well, it's one of those funny things, and Dan Carlin started all of this for me because I never liked history growing up. Mm-hmm. Like the formal historical class was always like boring to me, sitting through that and whatever. But I always loved reading biographies about historical figures that I was interested in. Mm-hmm. I like constantly was rereading Doc Holliday's biography over and over again by Matt Braun. Really great, probably very embellished, but very like I was totally like deeply into it and invested in it. And we never talked about nuance in history, I think.
Well, no, there really wasn't time, was there?
I guess not.
There wasn't time. But also, I think you're hitting on the fact that you are studying human beings and their human stories versus this happened and then this happened and then this happened, which is not very interesting if you think about it. Like, you want to know why people did the things that they did and the context of the time around the things that they did. That's what's interesting to me. I think that's what makes it Dan Carlin such a genius, is that he does put you there in the shoes of the person that is going through it. Right.
I think you're 100% correct there. It's about the people, and so often when, at least when I was going through history, I don't know if it's changed at this point, but like the textbooks that we had and all of that stuff, it didn't focus on the people, and the teachers didn't teach the people, they taught the events.
Yes, and when they touched on the people, they were like statues.
Yes.
They they were there, they did things, and they died.
Right.
And there was nothing else. So
there's no character. There was no like life behind them.
There's no character. I'm not blaming our teachers, by the way. I think that it's just hard. Like, you have so much time in a day, and you have to cover the curriculum. Right. And like, what can you do, right?
Also, only half of your class is listening and half of your class is asleep, and the ones that are listening, half of them are shitheads.
They are. And I had really excellent teachers. I had an AP American history teacher, and he was just like, I think that's the thing, is we were kind of at a higher level, so we could really sit in things and we could really talk about things. And he was just, man, I'll never forget the impact he had on me, and I think everybody in class. He was just a really excellent teacher, and he we went over, it was around the time that 9/11 happened, and it really, he like took the history that was happening and we ran with it. We talked about it, and we made it in real time. We kind of had a postmortem on it and wrote papers on it, and that was exciting because we were all horrified and terrified at the same time and trying to make sense of it. Mm-hmm. And so we were asked to do that in that moment, and that was really great.
Yeah, that connection to today is such a vital and important part of teaching history, I think. And we'll get some of it in this series. Promise. But yeah, like it, that's part of what you do. It's more than just a bunch of shit that happened in the past. It's also like, what does that tell us about the world that we live in now and the culture that has developed as a result of that?
Yeah. Oh, hello. Yes. Oh, by the way, this is Slaying Monsters. Across the table, we've got Matt.
Yo.
And I'm EJ.
Cool.
And today we are going to start a series. 2-part series, probably?
3-part series.
3-part series. Buckle up, everybody. 3-part series.
Come along for the ride.
On the very exciting Sloss Furnace?
Sloss Furnaces, actually.
Sloss Furnaces.
Multiple furnaces.
Okay, yes.
One location, multiple furnaces.
Wow. Exciting.
It's getting exciting already.
I'm excited. So, it sounds hot, actually. It sounds very hot.
Very hot. Yeah, it's very hot. It's very backbreaking labor, actually. It's really, really difficult to run a furnace.
I can see that. And a sloss is a type of furnace, right?
Oh, a sloss? You mean like the word
the
sloss?
Sloss furnace is a type of, it's like, isn't it specific to something? Or
No.
Is it just somebody's name?
No, a sloss is James Sloss.
Really?
Yeah, James Sloss was the founder of Sloss Furnaces.
He invented the furnaces of... Okay.
He didn't invent the furnaces. Oh. No. He just founded this furnace. It was actually the second in the Birmingham Industrial District after Alice Furnaces. And furnaces have been around before that. We're going to talk about all of this.
Yes, okay, good.
But no,
right.
a Sloss furnace is not a type of furnace. You might be thinking of the Bessemer process.
Oh, yes, that's what I was thinking. Thank you. The Bessemer process.
I can't
believe I didn't remember that.
If you listen closely, you can hear all the listeners just like pausing this episode and going to do something more meaningful with their lives.
I know. No, this is sleepy time podcasting. This is like, I'm going to go to sleep and this is what I'm going to put on to go to sleep because this is a good choice, I have to tell you.
Okay, I do on the tail of all of that, I do want to let everyone know that we are going to be talking about, some kind of mundane things in terms of the furnace process and how to make iron and how to make steel and, the development of these furnaces and stuff like that. But one of the rumors, the reports that surround Sloss Furnace is that it's haunted, and it's haunted by the ghosts of workers who have died there. Mm-hmm. And so we are not only going to talk about the deaths that real live workers had there, we're going to talk about them in some detail. And some of them were a little grotesque. They were a little rough. So I just want to let everybody know there won't be too much of that in this episode, but in the second episode we're really going to get into it. In the third episode we'll be in it too. So just be aware, if you're not quite feeling that today, maybe just move on. Yeah.
I'm gonna get into that hot goo.
Yeah, I mean, there again, it's hard to talk about ghosts and hauntings without talking about people who have died and sort of if the rumors and the stories are to be believed, the more horrible, horrific way you die, the greater the chance that you're going to hang around and try to let people know what happened to you. So that's what we have going on here in the haunted Sloss Furnace, the ghosts in the Sloss Furnace. That's what I'm calling our series here, the ghosts in the Sloss Furnace.
That's a lot of S's.
Ghosts in the Sloss Furnaces.
Jeez, okay.
So, in the middle of Birmingham, Alabama, lies a hulking ruin of metal. The remains of Sloss Furnaces, the only blast furnace left in America, is a relic of the Second Industrial Revolution. Part of the concentrated boom of industrialization in Birmingham, this region became known as the Magic City due to the explosion of industry that happened there. But the old hearth and the stacks hide a sinister secret, because this site is reportedly haunted by spirits of long-dead workers. A legion of people who died on the job, falling victim to poor safety regulations and shady business practices. According to legend, their souls remain trapped in the furnace, and their agonizing deaths have elevated Sloss Furnaces to be reportedly one of the most haunted places in the country.
Man, how come of all the ghost shows we've seen, we've never seen anybody go there?
You know what's funny?
What?
Ghost Adventures went there.
Did they really?
Yeah, Ghost Adventures went there. We're going to talk about that later on, about
good.
Their investigation there. Also, Chip Coffee, the medium, before he was working with Ryan Buell and Paranormal State, he was working on a like small town kind of show that was it's a very weird show. It's a show produced by Southwest Airlines.
No shit.
And it was about Southwest Airlines, but it was also about the people that were flying Southwest Airlines to get to their destinations, and they would focus on some of the people here and there. And so Chip Coffey and Patty Starr were featured on this show because they visited Sloss Furnaces, and I guess they flew Southwest to get there, and they had a whole affiliation with them.
Aw.
Yeah. Chip Coffey, he had a very uneventful investigation of Sloss Furnaces.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
So he didn't find it to be all that haunted.
I don't know what Chip Coffey would say about Sloss Furnaces, but basically nothing happened, and then he cut his hand on something, and they just ended the investigation.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
That's like Tetanus City up in that shit, man.
Yeah, much less Magic City, much more Tetanus City these days.
Oh, yes.
It is a very, very rusted site in modern day.
Yeah, I bet
sure.
there's a lot of urban exploration that goes on there. People get hurt a lot.
I don't think it's pretty locked down.
Is it?
I don't know how much people actually sneak in. It's kind of like Eastern State here in Philly. You can pay for admittance, and they have a museum, and they have stuff, and they'll take you around some of the areas. You can have weddings there now.
Way.
It's a whole kind of event space that they've built.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, my primary source for this series will be the pamphlet "The Ghost in the Sloss Furnaces" by Catherine Tucker Wyndham, released through the Birmingham Historical Society. And I'll also be using the comically huge book, Sloss Furnaces and the Rise of the Birmingham District, an Industrial Epic by W. David Lewis. Seriously, this book, you've seen this book.
This book has been haunting our coffee table for months.
I don't want to move it because it just sits, it's heavy.
It's too heavy to move. It just sits on our coffee table like this old ghost, and it will not leave. It is brown, and it is a little blue.
Yes.
And it is not very exciting to look at. It's got a picture of some furnaces on it.
Yeah, it's a picture of Sloss Furnaces.
Yeah. It's great.
I figure if we ever need something for self-defense, we could use that, because you could absolutely kill someone with the book. It's gigantic.
Definitely could.
Yeah. Okay. To tell the story of Sloss Furnaces, we have to tell the story of pig iron. Now, pig iron is one of several types of iron, including cast iron and wrought iron. Initially, humans had been using pure iron to make weapons and tools by melting iron ore and shaping it into various pieces. But the problem was that pure iron was very brittle, and it didn't hold up very well. So this pure iron, or wrought iron, was melted down, got worked into shapes. Early Chinese blacksmiths found that if you added a little carbon, you could change the composition of the iron and make it stronger. Now, this process of adding carbon to the iron was used as far back as 256 BC, but it didn't make it till Europe until the 12th century.
Oh, wow.
And it's probably traveled through the Silk Road, and that's how it found its way to Europe.
Right.
When you're mining your base product, your iron ore, you're never going to find it in that pure form, right? It's always going to be riddled with impurities. So that means that during the melting process, you have to separate the pure iron from the impurities, like calcium, silicon, all of those things would be mixed up in the iron, right? Those leftovers, do you know what we call those leftovers after they're removed from the iron?
I don't know. I'd call them dregs, but...
They're called slag.
Oh, slag.
Slag, okay. Yeah. So you're left with slag and pure iron, which can then be worked on its own or combined with, say, carbon, other elements. We call this pure iron, crude iron, or pig iron. And if you remelt that and cast it, then you get cast iron. Like you would use in a skillet industrial machine, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Now, if you take your pig iron and you remove almost all of the carbon, but then you add in manganese and silicon, you end up with a new alloy. Do you know what that is? Take a guess. It's a very, very important alloy in the dawn of the 20th century.
I don't know. Not wrought iron, because you already said that.
No.
Does it iron in the name of it?
Steel.
Oh, okay.
So that's how you get steel. And then if you add in enough chromium, you'll get stainless steel.
Oh, okay. Man. It's too much. I hate this, man. I hate this. It's fucking iron. Different kinds of fucking iron.
We're going to get to ghosts.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's just like, I don't know anything about this. It's good. It's good. I'm learning. It's
We're
good.
all going to learn today.
We're all just learning. But
Okay.
but steel, they used steel in Japan for weapons and stuff back in the day.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
been around for a really long time, that concept.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of iron and metallurgy in iron was, Europe struggled so much, and the Dark Ages really clamped down on a lot of the potential processing and advancement that could have happened during that time, because everybody was just like trying to survive or dying from the plague.
Yeah.
Whereas the East saw a lot more development and advancement at that time. So, Europe was just a little behind.
Yeah, Europe was behind, like the Middle East and like everything, very, very behind.
Very much, yeah.
Yes.
Now, by the mid-1850s, the steel industry began replacing the iron industry in many like industrial applications. The thing is, the steel industry still needed the iron because that's a critical component in the production of their steel. And as such, the steel boom, that didn't really unseat the iron industry. Instead, it just kind of shifted the focus of that industry more toward furnaces producing steel or producing the materials to produce steel instead of making cast iron pieces. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's why we don't see a whole lot of cast. I mean, we do see cast iron though.
You see cast
Lodge
iron now.
Logic, Lodge Logic. Yeah, right.
Yeah, the cookware
Like,
company.
They make stuff.
The Sawstop, the company that makes the really cool table saws with the auto shut-off blade, their bases are cast iron.
Oh, nice.
So cast iron is still around a lot. Industrial machinery sees a lot of cast iron because you need it to be heavy and durable and,
Yeah.
all of that.
There's something elegant about steel.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, steel, this is getting into the really nerdy stuff, but like steel is more useful. I believe it's more flexible. I read up on all of this, and even I got bored by a bunch of this shit. So
Yeah.
Steel, the big takeaway is that steel became the like primary thing to use in buildings. And as we were starting to build a lot of buildings, like buildings on a big scale and skyscrapers, and really expand the whole architectural industry, we needed steel. Therefore, we needed a constant flow of iron to make that steel.
Right.
So instead of making cast iron pieces, these furnaces became incentivized to produce pig iron and then sell it to steel manufacturers. Now, we call it pig iron. Do you have any idea why we call it pig iron?
Oh my God, you're gonna quiz me again on steel and iron. I don't know, because it oinked when you struck it. It went. I'm not gonna make an oink sound to people, but to make sure they don't fall asleep, we are gonna employ a foghorn every like 15 minutes.
We are not going
just
to
to
do
make
that.
sure people aren't falling asleep.
We are absolutely not going to do that.
We'll put it in post.
Okay, it's called pig iron because the molds for the ingots, or like the blocks of iron, were laid out in such a way that they resembled a litter of pigs sucking on a mother.
Ah.
So basically you had like a river of molten metal called a runner or a sow feeding into these smaller molds that were carved into sand.
Oh, I think I've seen this before.
Yeah,
in
you
passing.
definitely have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then once these little molds, these pigs were cooled, they could be broken off and then shipped out to the steel manufacturing places. Now, it should come as no surprise that steel, and therefore pig iron, was in very high demand in the 19th century as well, because the US started building railroads, bridges, also factories, tools. All of this stuff starts getting produced by this increasingly cheap metal. And thanks to Henry Bessemer, it's even cheaper to manufacture than before. I see your face just going completely blank here. I'm not going to ask you if you know who Henry Bessemer is.
He started this. He started the whole steel thing. He started the whole steel industry.
He did not.
Okay.
He did not. He developed the Bessemer process.
That's what I meant.
Yes.
He started the Bessemer process.
That was a process for introducing air into the molten pig iron, which separated out the impurities into a separate slag and left you with refined iron. But in order to do this properly, you needed containers made of dolomite or limestone. All this means that to be an effective iron and steel producer, you need a combination of things. You need, obviously, plentiful deposits of iron ore. You need lots of coal, and you're going to burn all of that to melt your iron. And then you need limestone and dolomite for your Bessemer process containers. That means that the most efficient furnaces had all of these within an arm's reach, and that enabled them to support their environments and ship their resources.
Wow, so they weren't bringing this stuff in from a distance. They had access to all of these ingredients, I guess.
So a lot of places did ship them in, but there was always a cost associated with it.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that all of these materials could be found in and around the Jones Valley in Alabama. Now, the Jones Valley was named for John James Jones, who first settled the region in 1813. Jones was notoriously wild and tended to get in trouble with his neighbors and his traveling companions, and so he had the nickname Devil Jones.
Ah, sounds like a fun guy.
Yeah. Devil Jones, he moved around a lot. And this is one of those times where, you would fuck shit up in a town, and then they would just kind of be like, sir, you gotta move on. And you'd be like, okay. And then you'd just, pack up. You'd get all your belongings. You just move to the next town, and everybody would be like, oh, hey, I've never seen you before. Be like, don't worry about all the shit that I caused over there. I'm just gonna live my life. And then you'd fuck shit up in that town and move on.
Yeah, that was another time.
Yeah, definitely, right? So Devil Jones left South Carolina and led a wagon train through Kentucky, through Tennessee, stopping briefly in each place, just long enough to cause some trouble in each place, before finally landing in this untamed valley in Alabama. Now there, Jones set up the second grist mill in Fayette County, and he was able to kind of find equilibrium in this sparsely populated area. I guess there wasn't a lot of people there that he could piss off. But he spent his life, just farming, running his mill, and he participated in the Baptist church there before his death in 1839 at the age of 70, which was pretty old at the time.
Sounds like he calmed down.
He calmed down. Yeah, I think the grist mill was good for him. I think it gave him something to occupy himself and keep him away from his neighbors and causing trouble and getting in fights with them. So now Devil Jones's final years saw the development of one of the most important industrial machines, the steam engine. In the 1830s, the first railroad lines opened, with locomotives initially imported from Great Britain. They weren't developed in America, they were actually imported from Great Britain. By the 1850s, we were building them ourselves, and we had over 9,000 miles of railroad track all over America. It's really hard to comprehend the impact that the railroad industry had on this country, and really on the entire world. I'm talking about the entire world. We talked in the Savo Lions episode about how we were, the British were importing Indian workers from building their lines in India. Like this was a global revitalization. It changed the entire scope of the world, basically overnight.
Yeah, it really did. It's like Silk Road on steroids.
There are a few things that come along in history that do this sort of thing. Silk Road's one of them, the railroad industry. I think the computer industry is one of them too, where just you're talking about a period of decades and then everything is different. Not only did the railroad allow commerce to exist on a completely unprecedented level, but you're talking construction, maintenance of all of these lines. That's a massive job creator.
Yeah, I was just going to say, a lot of people are put to work now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you have sky-high demands for steel and iron. That is the beginning of what we call the Second Industrial Age. And nowhere in the entire world is more primed for this industry than the Jones Valley in Alabama.
Oh, so they should be like raking in the dough.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's the only place in the entire world where your iron ore, coal, and limestone are found in such massive quantities so close together.
That's like perfect.
Yeah.
So like it's a very posh, cosmopolitan, well-developed, high society place.
Not at all.
Right.
Not at all.
Okay. I feel like this would be the case.
It's funny. So, you know, it was definitely a slow developer, and we'll talk about the development as we go through. But I don't know if it's the jobs necessarily, that the jobs are inherently just a little bit rougher.
They're not going to make you rich.
Than say manufacturing or something like that, you know? Yeah. Mining is really hard work.
Yeah.
Factories are really hard work. Furnaces are really hard work. And I don't know, then certainly, you know, we had a civil war. There were some diseases that swept through that just kind of kept the whole region in a state of flux for a really long time.
Yeah. Yep.
In the 1850s or so, this region is like poised to take off as this big industrial giant. And then in 1861, the Civil War started, and that almost immediately brought the development of the region to its knees. And in turn, brought the entire South's economy to its knees.
Yeah, so it's interesting because my question is, so the workers probably went to war.
Right, exactly.
And however, there was probably still a demand for this material.
There was.
So
now, not as great as it would be in the coming decades, but there was there was still demand, and I mean, you needed it for the war effort too.
Yeah, I was thinking that you did, because wasn't some of that material in weapons and cannons and
yes.
Okay, and railroads were still being built at the time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and railroads were very necessary, and the maintenance of those railroads were very necessary because not only were you shipping goods, but you're also shipping like war materials, weapons and supplies for your troops, and all of that are being shipped through the railroads.
Right, so you need this industry to continue. Right. But you're stuck with an issue because everybody's kind of going off.
Yeah, your workforce disappears because they go to war. Exactly. Yep. And on top of that, in terms of like the South's commerce, their whole business model is agrarian. So they rely really, really heavy on agriculture. And when a massive portion of your population just gets enlisted in the war effort, there's no one to oversee your farms. There's no one to oversee your mines. There's no one to oversee your factories. Not that the South didn't really have factories, but mines and that sort of thing. This labor shortage, combined with a very nasty drought in 1862, drove crop prices sky high. And the resulting inflation just decimated the South's infrastructure. And what's wild is that up until that point, it had been a really massively profitable area. The American South was the fourth richest country in the world in 1860.
In 1860.
Yeah.
So
right before the Civil War.
Yeah.
Like right before the Civil War broke out, it was the fourth richest country in the world, if you took it as its own country.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say it's not.
Yeah.
It wasn't its own country.
Right.
Okay. But if it was its own country, it would be. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Do you know why it was so profitable? This is kind of a softball.
I do know why. Because the South used slavery.
Yeah. It was all built on the backs of slave labor. Mm-hmm. We're not going to go into a long, drawn-out discussion of how like using enslaved people for free labor is horrendous and is not justifiable in any way.
Yeah, it's kind of a given.
It's kind of a given. In 1860, just before the Civil War started, the U.S. Census counted 3.9 million enslaved people. That's the population of Los Angeles.
Wow.
The population of Los Angeles was working as enslaved labor.
Wow.
And that's a gigantic force that you don't have to pay. And while some of them did receive like small amounts of money, that doesn't change the fact that they were still bought and owned.
Yeah, they couldn't fucking leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a carrot instead of a stick, but it's still a fucking terrible
it's a
carrot.
moldy carrot.
Right. Yeah, it's a moldy, disgusting carrot.
Yeah.
A fascinating side effect of having such a cheap workforce is that it allowed the South to stay focused on human labor instead of mechanization.
Oh, they didn't industrialize technologically the way that the North did.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You remember when we talked about Winchester, the developing Winchesters, and they adopted sewing machines that allowed their factories to really start turning out thousands of men's shirts a day or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that industrialization is occurring all over the North. We're talking shoes, clothing, tools, household goods, like all of that stuff. And thanks to the railroad industry, the North can now ship all of that to markets that they used to consider foreign, like their neighboring states. But the South didn't join in that industrialization. They ended up being like a whole generation behind when it came to mechanizing their labor. So you have all these wealthy landowners and business moguls, and to them, it's much easier to just keep throwing bodies at your labor, at your problems, rather than invest in development and manufacturing to build machines to do the work.
Yeah, you could have seen how the tide was turning, and you didn't.
Right.
You stuck with the old ways.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it was actually cheaper for them, believe it or not.
This is what we tend to do. We just tend to go with what's cheaper and not what is better,
and
morally in every other way.
And then I think it's a focus on the now instead of the future, where in the North you didn't have the access to human capital, and so you had to figure out ways now to improve your processes 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, as opposed to the South, which just had it and they could be like, oh, well, we don't need to worry about the future. We are taken care of right now. We're rich. We're the fourth richest country in the world.
Yeah, that's very dangerous thinking.
Yeah. So all of this comes to a head during the Civil War because you have enlisted business owners, but you also have a draft of sorts for the enslaved people too. The Confederate Army required slave owners to loan their enslaved people to the war effort, which dries up all of the labor force at home. And so now you've got a labor shortage in an economy that doesn't know how to function without people doing the work.
So they forced the enslaved people to work on the Confederate side.
Oh, yeah. On top of this, the Confederate States decided to issue their own money in 1861. These graybacks, as they were called, not greenbacks, but graybacks, they were initially pretty well received. It was great. You know, everybody felt really good about having money that was going to be their own. But there was a problem. Do you know, have you ever heard of the Graybacks before?
You know,
Or
I
anything about
haven't
the money?
actually.
Okay.
I haven't heard about the money.
I didn't know anything about this. So the South, they realize that in order to, like, they have no industry right now. They kind of have no money right now. So all of their money was marked as being payable after the war was over.
Oh, it's deferred pay.
Uh-huh.
If we did well, you get money. It's like a movie.
It's like a movie.
We're not going to pay you up front or anything.
Yeah, come work on my fucking movie, and you'll get paid after I sell it.
Yeah, you get experience, and you get
credit. Experience and credit.
Yeah.
Oh.
Man.
Yeah, so essentially it's like speculative money. It's a piece of paper that says, "Don't worry, I'm definitely going to pay you in a couple of years."
Oh my God.
And look, like, I'm aware that all money-based economies are essentially speculative anyway. You know, we have a friend who gives a lecture where he holds up a $5 bill and a $20 bill and is like, "Hey, you know, these are printed on the same piece of paper. How come this one's 5 and this one's 20?
Because we believe in it.
Because we believe in it, right? Like, we have collectively decided that piece of paper is worth something.
Yeah.
But as the war started to look pretty grim for the South in the later years, the Confederate dollar and the faith in the Confederate dollar paying out just plummeted. By 1864, one Confederate dollar was worth about 3 US cents and was still dropping. So the government scrambled, and, you know, this is what you see happen all the time when you have the bottom crash out of the market like this. The government starts issuing more money, and that drives the value down even more. And thanks to all of those factors, the South's economy completely imploded.
And so that probably has something to do with the war failing on the Confederate side, because
it was a huge factor. Yeah, they ran out of money.
Yeah, because you can't pay into the war machine that way. And
Yep. General William Sherman predicted this collapse as far back as 1860, saying, "The North can make a steam engine, locomotive, or railway car. Hardly a yard of cloth or a pair of shoes the South can make. You are rushing into war with one of the most powerful, ingeniously mechanical, and determined people on earth, right at your doors.
Yeah.
You are bound to fail."
He's so right. He's so right, man. I really do. Now that you put that into some kind of context, it's amazing to me that this group of people, the government in the South, thought that they could create money and go to war.
Yeah.
Like, that's very, I mean, the risk is insane.
And
what were they thinking? I mean, I know hindsight's 2020, man, and I'm sitting here in my comfy chair in the North, but it's like, I feel like Sun Tzu is like in his grave rolling around, like, no, you don't, you don't do this.
Pick a lane, buddy. Pick a lane, buddy. Either make money, like make your money, develop your own independent money, or go to war. You can't do both.
Yeah,
you can't do both.
But it's difficult, though, because I mean, honestly, I've never thought about the mechanics of a civil war and the difficulties, because if you don't divide up the money between borders,
right?
If you use the Union's money, you're paying into their war machine.
You absolutely are, right?
So what do you?
Yeah,
it's very difficult. Like,
you're funding the other side.
Yeah, like, I get why they did what they did, but my God, like, what a uphill battle that really is.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And then you also have a region, an army, a society that can't rely on any of its industry because all of the people who were participating in that industry are now at war.
When you post-mortem this, you really can see why they lost. Like, it's very, very clear.
Yeah. So that brings us to 1865 and the conclusion of the Civil War, with the South's economy just in ruins. Now, not only had they depleted their finances, thanks to all the fighting, but they found themselves without their most valuable resource, that human capital that buoyed them. Buoyed?
You say it in a way. Your accent is coming back. It comes out sometimes, guys. This is the Pennsylvania accent.
The Pennsylvania Dutch accent.
You can't say buoy.
Buoy.
There you go.
The human capital that buoyed them to be the fourth largest economy in the world.
Yeah.
Now they can't use slave labor. And they're almost a century behind in industrial development compared to the North. Things aren't looking very good. Alabama's governor, Robert Patton, calculated that the Confederate States, had spent about $500 million on the war effort. And all they had to show for it was destroyed farms, burned buildings, and dead soldiers. So what does this region need so badly right now? A new industry. One that could rival the cotton and tobacco plantations. And it just so happened that you have the Jones Valley primed to be a mining and iron production hub. But to get it on its feet, you are going to need a whole new approach and a new type of business person. One who is not going to approach it in the same way that, say, the plantation owners of old would. Enter James Withers Sloss.
Yay, Sloss.
Born in 1820, barely educated, like not really, didn't go to school at all. He spent 7 years as a butcher's apprentice and a bookkeeper. Now, the thing that Sloss did was that he constantly saved his money. It was like he was just one of these kind of pack rat guys that he was just always putting stuff back. Loved to see that he had this like cache of money. He ended up opening a merchant shop, and then with the success of his merchant shop, again, saving as much as he possibly can, he bought and opened a plantation. By the time he went to serve in the Civil War, he had become one of the wealthiest business owners in Alabama.
So he had a plantation and stuff?
He did, yeah.
I take back my yay, Sloss.
Well, yeah, you know.
I take that all the way back, dancing that back. So he was
okay.
You know. Uh-huh.
W. David Lewis writes that Sloss was known for his business acumen and his Irish wit, which I assume means that he would fit right in the cast of like Dairy Girls. I looked up old Irish witticism and I found these gems here.
Find the dirty limericks?
Well, there weren't really that many dirty limericks. It's stuff like this, like, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. That's
no way.
One of the things that Sloss might say to you. The older the fiddle, the sweeter the tune, or the sweeter the music.
Aw.
If you lie down with dogs, you'll get fleas.
Oh, that's an Irishism?
That's an Irishism.
That's cool.
Yeah, a witticism. And it's as hard to see a woman crying as it is a barefoot duck. I don't know what that means either.
So I think he's complaining that women are emotional.
But is it hard?
No,
what's hard about seeing a barefoot duck?
Nothing. He's saying it's hard to see a woman crying as it is a barefoot duck.
Oh,
ducks don't wear shoes.
I know ducks don't wear shoes.
Matt, ducks don't wear shoes.
I thought it was emotionally taxing on you to see a woman crying, but no, you're right. It's like
difficult to.
Yeah. It's as hard to find a crying woman as it is a barefoot duck.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Man, that makes him even more of a jackass.
That's it.
Okay.
I mean, but did he say that?
Well, he didn't say that.
Yeah.
This was just on a website.
This is an Irish witticism. Okay. It's hilarious that you are such an asshole that you are making the women around you cry. Like, this is... You need to look inside yourself, sir, and figure out what you're doing wrong.
Yeah. What's that? If you're always surrounded by assholes, you're the asshole.
You're the asshole.
Or the Letterkenny, there's always a dick in a boat.
Yeah.
Always a dick on a boat. Yeah.
It says more about boats than anything else.
So in the 1850s, Sloss became interested in the growing railroad industry. Now, he'd helped to fund completion of the rail lines between Nashville and Decatur. Decatur, yeah. Not in Alabama, right? He helped to fund the completion of rail lines between Nashville and Decatur, Alabama. Before he headed off, and he served as a colonel for the Confederacy. Now, when he returned to his home state after the war, he was just devastated by the economic instability and by the North's success. Now, he's been fighting these guys for years. He's very proud of where he came from in terms of like Alabama. And there was this whole idea of like keeping what we could after the Civil War. We may have lost, but we will keep as much as we can as the South for ourselves.
You mean like the wealth, or like, because
whatever you could,
like the culture,
the culture, like the land, identity? The industry, the identity, whatever it was, like no, we're gonna hold on to this for ourselves.
Well, because they had carpetbaggers coming down, right?
Yeah.
And
you bet. Yep.
Picking from the corpses of everything. Yeah.
Since you mentioned the carpetbaggers, Sloss was seeing the rail industry, the northern rail industry, take off and try to knock on the South's door. That was spearheaded by projects like the Cincinnati Southern Railway. And that particular line had made it as far as Nashville and was really starting to push into the southern states. Their prospect was the Gulf of Mexico, essentially running the whole way from Cincinnati all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. But to get there, they were going to have to travel through Alabama. And that's where Sloss dug his heels in. Because he figured if he could set up a line himself across Alabama, he could not only maintain control of the southern section of the railroad, but he could also create like a nice little capital investment for himself in that region. So Sloss partnered with a man named Albert Fink, who was a very rowdy German and the chief engineer of the Louisville and Nashville Railroad. That's the L&N. Fink's expertise was in bridges, specifically truss bridges, the ones with all the, the iron bridges, they got all the braces on them. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Above and below the tracks and stuff. I think Goatman Bridge is one of them.
Oh.
Yeah, Goatman Bridge is a big truss bridge.
Mm-hmm. Those are cool. I like those truss bridges. Are they trestle bridges or truss bridges?
I read truss bridges.
Probably truss. Okay, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know the difference between a trestle. Did you say trestle?
Trestle. Oh, trestle or
trestle? Trestle is something else, I think.
Trestle. Because we had some trestle bridges near our house, but I never knew what they meant. But we just always called them the trestle bridges.
A trestle bridge has all of the like foot structure below it. They have supports running the whole way, whereas a truss bridge has the top and all of the. I don't know. There's some physics with how it all supports itself.
This is just a note for the podcast. The foghorn here.
So Fink and Sloss's deal meant that L&N had right of way to run through Alabama. Now, there was initial pushback on this investment by the railroad's directors, but Fink, being kind of a blowhard, was just insistent that this is what we do, this is how we're going to outpace the North, and we're going to retain Alabama as a good, like, Southern industry, good place for us. Things got so heated during their initial pitch meeting that a fist fight nearly broke out between the directors and Fink. But Fink ended up smoothing things over by, no shit, ordering whiskey for everyone.
Oh, that's a good idea. That usually works.
And so then, after getting all the directors drunk, they all authorized the railroad.
Oh my God.
And they were good to go.
Wow. That's great.
Yeah. The massive undertaking of the L&N Railroad through Alabama caused the region to change pretty much overnight. The community of Birmingham, which at the time was a couple of tents, like hastily thrown together, cabins, hardly anything at all, transformed into a thriving town, thanks to the development of the railway and its need for ties to be laid the whole way. All of a sudden, you have this massive job creator coming through. And there's no better place to get the iron for the rail that's running through Alabama than the Jones Valley. Perfect. Sloss, ever the shrewd investor, he wants in on the action too. And he's not the only one who's looking at this railroad and saying, wow, there's massive development opportunities down here. While there had technically been blast furnaces all over this region since the Civil War, the area really exploded in development during the 1870s. So things look really good at this time. Really starting to see development of Birmingham as a town. There's got a population of 4,000, has over 100 shops, has 6 churches, all part of its region. Then, in 1873, there's a cholera epidemic that swept through the region. many people died, a lot of the people just fled, and it gutted the economy. And it was so devastating that Albert Fink threw up his hands, said, "This whole thing is a loss," and he quit.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, he backed out of the deal, departed the project. As luck would have it, around this time, another investor hit his stride in the region, and that was Henry Fairchild de Bardeleben. Now, he was the son of a cotton plantation owner, and his father died when he was just 10 years old. Orphaned, he became ward to Daniel Pratt, who owned a series of coal mines and the Oxmoor Furnace. When Pratt died in 1873, de Bardeleben inherited all of those mines and the furnace. So now outfitted, de Bardeleben was looking to the future. So in 1879, he constructed Alice Furnaces, named for his daughter. This facility was not only the largest blast furnace in the region, but it was also the first designed to run entirely on coke instead of coal. And not surprisingly, it also became the most efficient pig iron furnace in the region.
So you mean Coke, like Coca-Cola or cocaine?
No. So when it comes to this, you have coal.
Yeah.
And then there's a process that you can use to superheat the coal into coke, which is a more efficient fuel.
Oh,
it's
my
called
God.
coke.
Really?
Yes, it's called coke. C-O-K-E.
It is spelled the same way as
spelled
Coke.
like Coke.
Come on.
Yeah.
How am I supposed
Not
to know
cocaine.
that? I thought he switched to cocaine dealing.
I mean, he probably should have. It probably would have made him more money.
It would have been better, probably. Okay. Oh my God, that's funny. Because I think they had cocaine back then. I think they were definitely using it.
They were. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So I was like, why not?
It just pour that into your furnace. I'm sure it'll do great.
It'll get really hyperactive. It'll work overtime.
Now, a pamphlet from the Woodward Iron Company said, "The original iron furnace was extremely important in the development of the Birmingham district because its success convinced Northern capital that the manufacture of iron with coke in Birmingham was practical. It is a fact that not even a single ton of iron was rejected by the customers."
Wow.
And really high quality stuff because of all the cocaine.
Yeah, it's all that cocaine snorting. Everybody's really efficient.
Alice Furnace made it clear that the Birmingham district was poised to become like a tyrant of the industrial age here. With his new coke burning system making the coal more efficient and taking advantage of the Bessemer process because you have the limestone in that region, this little town is becoming the most important spot in the world for pig iron production. And soon orders start just pouring in. De Bardeleben is just overwhelmed with everybody who's like, I need iron. You know, we're building buildings, we're building bridges. Like we need this. And so de Bardeleben appointed his friend James Sloss to oversee the Oxmoor furnace to help ease his burden. But the old Oxmoor, despite, its recent conversion to the coke process, it wasn't as efficient as the Alice furnace. And it was clear to both of these men that in order to keep up with the orders and keep them as like these tyrants in the South, they were going to need another furnace, one built with brand new technology, a sister to Alice Furnaces, if you will. And so, on March 28th, 1881, what was incorporated?
The Sloss Furnace.
Yes. They broke ground in a very, very hot Alabama June. Imagine building a furnace, like throwing all this metal around in the middle of June in Alabama. Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of like, it is already a hot environment. Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is, like, the construction of it actually took place through most of the winter.
Oh.
But in order to get it done, they had to start in June. They finished in April. They worked the entire winter.
Wow.
But they just had to work through the summer, too.
Damn.
That furnace sat on 50 acres with a stack or exhaust column standing at 60 feet high, 18 feet wide. It used 2 blowing engines to direct their heat exchange and 10 boilers, each 30 feet long and nearly 4 feet wide. And it could produce 25 tons of pig iron per year and about 80 tons per day. Now, to Alabama, the construction of this furnace was a miracle. You're talking a community that's now 2 decades out of the Civil War. Agriculture industry has never recovered. Not fully, anyway. Cotton demand has gone way down. The price to harvest it was way, way up. More than it's ever been, of course, because you don't have the human capital to harvest it. You gotta, pay your workers instead.
Wow, what a concept.
And speculation started buzzing that the only way forward for the South was through industrial manufacturing. And the Sloss and Alice's furnaces are leading this charge. In 1882, the first blast was fired at the furnace. Let's talk about this process. Because not only is it noisy and dirty, it's also really fucking dangerous.
Especially back then.
Yeah.
There was like nothing. They had probably no safety mechanisms for anybody at all.
Oh
right?
my God. So we are gonna talk in the next episode about, we'll talk a little bit about it in this episode too, but we'll get into the accidents that happened there and just the way that you sort of had to go through everything. And yeah, OSHA wasn't a thing, you know?
No.
And the other thing, we'll talk more about this in the next episode, but it was very much a transient type of employment. So a lot of these workers, they would roll up, maybe get a job, maybe stay there for a little while. And then if the work was too dangerous, you just moved on. But that didn't necessarily influence the furnace to make the job safer. They would just hire somebody else. So, the whole industry kind of allowed the danger to continue because there was nobody that was like, hey, this is really fucking scary up here.
Yeah, and you probably didn't express those things back then.
No, you just moved on.
You didn't complain.
Because what would happen is you'd be like, wow, this is really dangerous. And they'd be like, if you don't like it, find another job.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say you're gonna fire a blast in this furnace, right? You're gonna make some pig iron.
All right.
You ready to make some pig iron with me, EJ?
I'm ready. Let's do it. Let's lose our limbs.
So first, you need Coke for your blast.
All right, got some Coke right here. Let me get my credit card.
So you don't call up your dealer. No. Put the mirror away.
Moving that aside. Okay.
You fill your 120 on-site ovens with coal. Now these are domed ovens, and they're filled or charged from the top. They're all clustered together to keep their heat contained and make their burn more efficient. And after you burn these, you reduce them to coke, which is superheated coal. This could take as long as 3 days. Then you empty these ovens from the bottom because that's where the heated coke gets shoveled out. You have to do this while the coke is hot because it needs to be hot to be charged for the blast in the furnace. But that means that you're exposing yourself to searing temperatures and essentially superheated rocks.
Yeah, so you're also breathing some bad stuff in.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's not good for your lungs and all that. Yeah. Okay.
So you shovel this coke, these superheated charcoals, into your wheelbarrow, which you push up switchback walkways to the top of the furnace stack. Remember that this is 60 feet high. Switchback walkways all the way up to the top. Up there, you charge the large funnel at the top. Essentially, you push your wheelbarrow up and then you dump all of that superheated coke into the furnace. Mm-hmm. That's called the bell of the furnace at the top. You would also dump in iron ore because you need that for the refining process, and limestone. That's the basis of the Bessemer process.
Why didn't they use pulley systems?
To get that kid up there?
To get the coke up there.
I have no idea.
Okay.
I have no idea. My guess is that it was probably too hot and too heavy, but I don't know that for sure.
But people are not as strong as a pulley system.
I don't know.
Okay.
They push wheelbarrows. That's what they did.
All right. Continue.
Now, meanwhile, while there's one person up there dumping the coke into the bell, back on the ground, you have people firing up the 10 steam engines, which feed into blowers that direct hot air into the bottom of the furnace. Now, that steam would ultimately reach temperatures of 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, or 1,100 degrees Celsius. These engines, they all need to be pressure sealed, because if there's a leak in one of those engines, it would cause that superheated steam to explode outward. And that would cause like debilitating burns if it didn't kill you right off the bat.
Right.
Now, when they were used correctly, the engines blasted hot air into the base of the furnace and forced a chemical reaction. The coke reacts with the oxygen and creates carbon monoxide, which, is delightful to breathe in.
It's wonderful, yes.
And it also removes the oxygen from the ore. Limestone then reacts with the impurities and it bonds with them, and that forms the slag that we talked about before, which is less dense than the iron ore, so then that separates out and floats to the top. Mm-hmm. The molten iron gets siphoned off the side of the furnace, where it runs into molds that are like formed in heat-resistant sand. That's, of course, the pigs and the sow, and where the pig iron gets its name. Now, once the molds are filled, they cool, not too much. You don't want them to be too cool because then you won't be able to break them. So you need to break them when they're still a little bit hot. You do that with big hammers. So you walk and you swing a big hammer down on hot metal and smash it, and there are sparks flying and hot metal flying, charring you, charring the men around you.
But you're wearing safety goggles. You're wearing safety clothing. Nothing.
You're wearing. You're
butt naked.
You're wearing overalls. No, I don't think they were naked. No, but you're wearing overalls.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah. Once you break the pig iron from the sow, the main channel, that gets loaded onto train cars and transported to wherever it's ultimately going. Oh, and by the way, the entire furnace has to be on a highly engineered foundation and have an incredibly thick jacket, because not only does molten iron and slag weigh an insane amount, but it also has to accommodate the pressure of the blast from those steam engines. If that jacket cracked, molten iron would come spraying out the side of the furnace. And somehow that is the most horrifying thing to me about this whole process. That like the notion of being covered with liquid metal, like a fucking backwards T-1000.
Yeah, like what the fuck? Like it cools on your flesh.
Yeah.
And then you have to remove it.
Yes.
But then your flesh goes.
Well, you're probably dead.
You're probably dead. You're probably. That's a good thing.
I just keep having this image of standing there and seeing it, like seeing it spraying out and screaming, and then it gets in your mouth.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Yeah. Horrible.
Yeah. I mean, either you want it to be like, okay. I mean, I feel like if you get a little bit on you, that's a life experience. Yeah, you can take that to the bar and you can talk to your buddies about it.
I guess this is a limit.
You'd be like, remember that time I had to rip metal off of me? That was,
oh God,
that was a tough time, But like, I just go quickly, If it's gonna be anything else, man. Whew. I hope it's quick if it happens like that, because that's really bad.
It's bad enough. I've had like hot like melted chocolate on my skin, and that's bad enough.
I know.
I can't imagine.
Us postmodern people are so soft.
Yeah, we really are.
I had chocolate on me. That hurt.
Needless to say, working in such a furnace is a really dangerous business. Do you want to guess how many months it took before there was the first horrific accident at Sloss Furnaces?
1.
No, it was a little bit longer than that.
Oh, good for them. They should get an award.
It was
Safety
7.
award,
oh, yeah,
months.
yeah. They had the little sign on the wall that was like, it's been 1 month since our last accident. Yeah, it took 7 months.
I'm actually surprised to hear that. I thought there'd be a lot more, a lot sooner.
2 men Alec King and Bob Mayfield were working on a scaffolding inside the stack, inside the main, the tower, right? Okay. And they were on a scaffolding in there. They were cleaning coke off the walls. See, coke is both abrasive and clingy. So much like, a fireplace, if you leave it too long, it'll adhere to the walls of the stack and cause like fires inside there or clogs or something like that. So King and Mayfield, they were scraping it off and they managed to get a really substantial piece of hardened coke off the wall. But it fell with such force that when it landed, it kicked up a cloud of dust. And I think about dropping like a stone on a barbecue grill that you've spent like the last 8 hours grilling on. Mm-hmm. And it kicks up all of this dust. And this billowing cloud of ash, still warm, by the way, from the previous fires, engulfed the men. They had nowhere to go, and so they suffocated and then fell toppling over the railing and onto the hot debris below.
Jesus. They couldn't climb out or anything. They were just like stuck there.
No, I imagine that the way the scaffolding was that it was set up and they like lowered themselves down onto it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they would have to like scale a rope or something like that. And it's just I mean it happened so fast.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. That same week, another tragic death happened. This one not at Sloss, but at the neighboring Alice furnace. A man named Samuel Cunningham climbed to the top of the stack and jumped into the furnace as the other workers watched.
He killed himself.
Oh
my God.
Yeah. Now, it would be easy to claim that Cunningham was possessed by evil spirits, pushing him to this self-destructive behavior. But examination of his situation sheds more light on the plight of the workers at these furnaces. See, Cunningham was one of many transients, like we talked about. He had just arrived from Kentucky and he'd gotten a job at Alice, working in the rolling mill. So his job was to push the metal through rollers and shape it down to a uniform thickness. Just another in our list of long backbreaking jobs.
Yeah.
It's very likely that Cunningham was suffering from depression, and having a job in a dangerous environment didn't help at all. Mm-hmm. While the Birmingham region was improving, it wasn't what you'd consider like a thriving community. If you lived there, your day mostly consisted of going to work, drinking in the saloon until you fell asleep, and maybe a trip to church once a week to just break up the monotony.
Man.
It's not hard to see how this could affect someone's mental state. Mm-hmm. But even with the harsh working conditions, arduous labor, and the vacant community, these things are nothing compared to the sinister foreman at Sloss. A man so driven by his own success that he'd put his workers' lives on the line. But we'll talk about him and the other tragedies at Sloss Furnace in the next episode.
Ooh, all right.
Yeah.
This was not as boring as I thought it was going to be.
Well, that's good. Okay.
You freaking were like, this whole time, these months, you were like, get ready to talk about the industrial era. Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, it was really interesting.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I hope it was enjoyable for you.
It's a tough part of our country's history, and it's weird because like in history, getting back to history class, we talked a lot about the fall of the agricultural industry in the South, right? But we didn't really touch on the industrial aspect of the South. We talked about the carpetbaggers that came down and like took things from, but we did not talk about the other aspects. So it's a very interesting supplement to that. Yeah. And we will talk a lot about this. I mean, it's kind of one of the themes that run through everything. But this whole notion of just a devastated economy and trying to rebuild and trying to figure out your place when your entire workforce disappears, basically. Yeah. It was unpaid workforce. I mean, like your workforce should have disappeared. They should have been paid. But but you had a culture that for 100 years or more
yeah. has been built on a very particular kind of labor, mm-hmm. and now no longer has that labor and mm-hmm. is struggling to catch up to the North, to the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. I mean, Britain had outlawed slavery long before this, mm-hmm. you know?
As long as the country's been around, we have had slavery.
Yes.
It's like from the very, very beginning of this country. And that's like right. the North. Like it was very common.
It was all over, yeah.
It was all
mm-hmm.
over.
Yep.
And, you know, this country came to its senses, but it took it should have never happened in the first place. But like the South really did not modernize. They did not change their thinking, and it was. And
then by the time they were pushed there, mm-hmm. it was too late. Mm-hmm. And that was the thing that struck me is that even if you wanted to, you were a century behind. Mm-hmm. There's no way that they could have possibly ramped up textiles in time to compete with the North, because you have like the Winchester factory there mm-hmm. is pumping out 1,000 shirts a day.
Yep.
And you need 90 years to get yourself up to that speed.
It's a lesson against backward thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Embrace innovation. Yeah.
Embrace the innovation as you see it, and be looking ahead. Mm-hmm. Don't just pay attention to what's going on right now, because that was part of the problem. They were like, well, we have the human capital to take care of this problem now. I see no reason to believe that the human capital will ever be exhausted. Mm-hmm. But then it was.
Yeah.
And that's
terrible thinking.
That's not even talking about the moralistic problem of using an enslaved labor force.
Yeah. It's I mean, there's so many problems. There's so many problems with it.
But yeah, so next episode, we will talk about the foreman at Sloss Furnaces and the terrible, terrible, terrible things that he did.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sounds like we have a sadist on our hands.
To say the least.
Wow.
Yes.
Damn. Okay.
Yes. But, you know, I won't necessarily say that it has a happy end, but it has a satisfying end.
All right. Sounds like this should be a movie or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, really it would make a good horror movie, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, it's nothing wrong with a little good vengeance horror, right? Yeah.
Yes, that's
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sounds like it'd be great.
Cool. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everybody.
We'll catch you next time.
Yeah, congratulations if you didn't fall asleep.
You're terrible.
And remember, ducks don't wear shoes.
Ducks don't wear shoes.
That's right.
Right. Now I understand it.
I'm glad I helped you with that.
I appreciate it.
And I did it without crying.
Be safe out there.
Be safe.
Thanks for listening to Slaying Monsters, the Paranormal History Podcast. If you like the podcast, there's a couple ways to show your support. You can tell your friends, you can leave us a rating and review on your podcast platform, or you can head over to slayingmonsterspodcast.com and click on the Support Us button to leave a donation. For questions, suggestions, and other feedback, reach out to us, slayingmonsterspodcast@gmail.com, and stay up to date by following us on Instagram @slayingmonsterspodcast. Your support helps us grow, and we are truly grateful to have our listeners and community.